Welcome to Monster Chats, presented by Monster VoIP, where we share the tools, methods, and best practices that business leaders use to build new connections, strengthen relationships, and impact sales in organizations of all shapes and sizes. If you have any questions that come up during today's episode, please text them to 424-378-6966. Please welcome the founder of Monster VoIP, your host, Colin Mitchell.
On today's episode, I'm talking with Anson Sowby of Battery. He is the CEO and co-founder. We're going to learn more about his story and the journey of starting Battery. My name is Colin Mitchell. I'm the host of Monster Chats and the founder of Monster VoIP. Anson, welcome to the show. How are you doing?
Hi, Colin. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, let's jump in and just tell folks a little bit about yourself, your story, where you grew up, how you ended up in your entrepreneur journey, and maybe a little bit about your career path.
Yeah, for sure. I was the son of two entrepreneurs that I think it just kind of took me a long time to realize it. They were kind of two very different types of entrepreneurs. My dad just had a small optometry practice, but definitely treated that like a small business and a small company. As I was growing up, my mom was a sitcom director. In LA in the 80s and 90s. So I kind of got babysat on the set of the A-Team and like the Wonder Years and all these cool shows. And then, going to my dad's office and filing medical files for his patients. So kind of, I guess it was just kind of, in my DNA from when I was a kid, just being around, entrepreneurs my whole life.
Okay. And so then when did you first decide that you wanted to be an entrepreneur yourself?
So I started to go the really traditional route. I went to a business school at USC. I was not in the entrepreneur group. I just thought I wanted to go work for big companies. So I started out doing that, working at Universal and then in the toy industry. And then I was really kind of on the big corporate, big company path. But it was interesting. I was in divisions that were in much larger companies, obviously, but these divisions acted very entrepreneurially. One was a new video games division at Universal Studios, and another was a new toy division at a different company. And kind of the divisions acted very much like, they had the backing of the larger company, but led by very entrepreneurial principles. So I guess the seeds of being an entrepreneur were kind of sown when I was a kid. And then in my 20s, as I was working in these big companies, I was drawn towards the way these upstart, fast, quick moving, the whole mantra, fail fast divisions were acting. And then at that time, I saw an opportunity to harness the power of mommy bloggers. It's not really called that anymore, but that was a thing, back in whenever it was, 2006, 2007. And so I had an idea to essentially help big brands tap into what was slowly becoming the power of, the blogosphere, kind of before Facebook and Twitter, but still in the kind of MySpace and Friendster. So I saw an opportunity and I brought it to my boss at that time. I said, all right, I think we got to stop running TV commercials. And what if we did a little bit with mommy bloggers? And I swear to God, I printed out the proposal on a good stack of paper, like a good business school student. He wadded it up and bounced it off my forehead. And I swear to God, he said, Anson, stop talking to me about this internet bullshit. And this was like, This is like 2006. It wasn't like this was 1986. Like the internet was obviously still very much a thing. And I just thought, God, you got a $20 million house, but I think you're wrong about this one thing. Obviously, I didn't say that to him, but I thought that. And so I had the idea. I said, I kind of feel really passionate about this. I think this is a real thing. And so I started a company back then of helping kind of brands like Dove and TJ Maxx and Marshalls, brands that spoke a lot to women, and we harnessed the power of the blog. Just it literally came out of that moment when he bounced the proposal off my forehead. And yet he lived in a $20 million house, so the guy knew what he was doing. But I really felt in my heart that there was a way. So I was kind of lucky enough to leave and then, start my first company at that point.
Wow. Okay. So we're at that point, I'm guessing based on his response that people weren't really using that as a marketing technique of tapping into these, these days we call them influencers, right? But I mean, the mommy blogs or blogs, that was basically they were influencers at that time. So people weren't using them to market products at that time.
Right, exactly. They were starting to be used, but really more to market products. You'd go with your your TV campaign or print or online was starting, and obviously PR and the right editors was still a big thing as it still is now. But yes, they really weren't even called influencers. They really just were called blog, and it was very much the wild, wild west, right? There was no government, FTC kind of overseeing what they were doing and how they were doing, and it was very much the wild, wild west. But yes, it was essentially the beginnings of influencers.
Right. Yeah, and most of these bloggers just were they didn't have a company. It's just them writing about things, right? And they had an audience, and those audience tied to these products or brands that you're trying to market or sell goods to, right? So okay, so you started your first company. What was that company?
That was called Rocket XL.
Okay, and how did that go? What was how long did you do that for? What were some of the learning lessons out of that, and how did things go?
Yeah, so we were lucky enough, I think, to be at the right place at the right time and work with such blue chip brands, like Unilever and P&G and the NFL to help them tap into the blogosphere. And we really kind of, no pun intended, that we were like a rocket shot out of a cannon, where we grew. We started in LA, and then we did a lot of our developments because we started building widgets and very basic apps back then that embedded, onto a blogger's review of the product. So we set that up in Stockholm, and then we grew it in New York, and then we ended up selling the company to a larger communications conglomerate called Cosette Communications. So we sold that within a few years, and then I had about a 2.5-3 year earnout to complete the sale, and that all completed in about 2012, 2013. So did that for about 6-7 years, and from where we began to, obviously the world of influencers and social media just changed so much, right? From 2006 to 2012, right? I mean, it was just two different worlds at that point, and we morphed and shifted and shaped the company, but definitely the world changed so much, honestly for the better, in that category. But again, I think we were lucky enough to be at the right place at the right time pretty early on.
Yeah. So these kind of low tech widgets that you're talking about, I mean, are we talking about like affiliate links basically?
Yeah, exactly. Right. So let's say, and we did this more with video games. So PlayStation was one of our clients. When we had a blogger do a review about, the latest game, we develop a widget, and then we just put, whether it was, the trailer or screenshots or assets, and we just, feed that over the blogger via, an embed code. And then we started to get a lot more clever with the widgets. Then they kind of became little contests and really kind of self-contained, marketing modules that the bloggers would host on their sites during the campaigns.
Okay, wow. And then as a startup, what was your secret sauce to like landing some of these big brands?
Yeah, my business partner was a guy named Craig Howe. Was just, I mean, the gift. He could sell ice to an Eskimo, as they say. He just had a really good way of connecting. He'd meet someone who'd introduce him to the head of marketing at Dove. Meet someone, introduce him to the head of marketing at Old Spice. He was just he was a salesperson without being a salesperson, right? Mm. It was just, here's what we're doing. This is and a lot of these bigger brands, I mean, kudos to the Unilevers and P&Gs. They always try to stay ahead of things despite having such, old brands and kind of classically trained ways of doing things. They were very open to new ways of doing things. And he had a knack of just getting to the right person and letting them hear the pitch. And then we were off and running.
So it was just so different than what everybody else was doing that most of them were willing to go along for the ride and give it a try.
Yeah, I think so. But at the end of the day, it was all about influence. And at that time, these bloggers really weren't being approached by many brands. So they were just people in their homes saying, wow, I love this new Tide detergent I just got. So it was so honest. It
Yeah.
was so truthful. And some of these bloggers maybe only had 700 subscribers, right? I mean, it was kind of quantity over quality. You had to work with a ton back then to get any movement. But at the end of the day, it was just it was the principle that all the big brands could understand. It was just the principle of just honest influence, but done a different way.
Okay. All right. So fast forward 2012, the end of that venture for you. What was next?
Yeah. So then I finished that earnout with Rocket. And then I started Battery, and Battery is really more of call it a traditional ad agency in terms of, pre-roll film, commercials, out-of-home, things like that. But with Battery, and again, that was in LA as well, we saw the opportunity of, at that time, the video game industry was starting to transition from, I go to Target and I pay $60 for the latest video game. I play the heck out of it for 4 weeks, and then I'm kind of done and on to the next thing. So the industry was starting to switch from that model to where it was digital distribution, right? To where these games had longer life cycles. Either they were subscription models, or I could play it for 12 months and more content would come out. So the gaming industry was switching from kind of like DVDs on shelf to really what it is now, right? An evergreen live experience. But video games were still being marketed like DVDs and films, right? Let me try to drive as many sales for 6 weeks, and then boom, I'm on to the next one. Instead of being marketed like a Dove stick of deodorant or like Love's diapers, meaning something I've got to, constantly push, because it's this kind of, not that Love's diapers are a living, breathing experience, but that customers are continuing to come back and make purchases. So we saw the opportunity, and then I approached a few games developers like Warner Brothers Interactive, who had a lot of big franchises like Batman Arkham and Lego and Mortal Kombat. And we approached them kind of with the brand building rigor that I learned from working with Unilever and P&G, but then done essentially applying that to entertainment. So how do you apply consumer packaged goods to entertainment? And, a lot of big, so we started off in streaming pretty early, with Netflix and NBC Universal and Lionsgate. And then, so we started taking that model of traditional brand marketing principles, but applied to a new economy, right? Like games as a service or streaming entertainment. So we've kind of taken that model and now applied that to a lot of different industries now over the last few years.
And do you have the same co-founder?
I do. Yeah. So I co-founded it with Philip Kosid. So he runs all of the creative side. So yeah, we started it together, and we're still married in business and joined at the hip.
Oh, awesome. All right. And so what are some of the cool things that you guys are working on right now?
Yeah, so right now we did a lot of big global work for Epic Games, who's the parent company of Fortnite. Epic Games started their own digital PC games marketplace called the Epic Games Store, and we're doing a lot of work with them, kind of globally, of figuring out how to really how to grow the PC gaming marketplace, and obviously PC games. Hardly anyone goes and buys, a PC game disc anymore, right? It's all digital distribution, and it's kind of taken the early stuff that we did with Warner Brothers Interactive 5-6 years ago with console titles, and obviously the PC games is that kind of on steroids. So it's a really interesting global kind of thing of how do you enter new markets and how every market is so different. And, few brands are as global as Fortnite and Epic, but it's a really interesting process of kind of taking that 100% digital experience and helping them grow into different markets.
And how has COVID like really changed that industry currently?
Yeah, I mean, for the most part, the gaming industry has really benefited for, better for worse, because of COVID, just because obviously the time spent gaming, the time spent on Twitch, the dollars spent in games, obviously probably, free to play games are increasing a lot faster than, the traditional games, just because the economy's, hurting. But yeah, the gaming marketplace is just hitting numbers over the last few months that it had never really hit before. And it's amazing, all the development teams, all these publishers, even though everyone's working from home, kind of the show is still going on, and games like Fortnite are still updating, on an hourly basis.
Yeah. Now, you've been around for about 7 years. So, I mean, I'm sure anybody who's been around 7 years, there's been some possible ups and downs. What have been some of the biggest challenges of running Battery?
Oh man, I'd say in the early days, number one, it was how do you attract big talent that's used to a certain salary level at a big agency, and you don't have that money to give them. And so, obviously some people are motivated by salary, others are motivated by great work or respect or flexibility or a combination of all those. And so the number, because obviously in a business like ours, talent and the people are number one. So number one, it was also, how do you convince really, really great people to take a chance on you? Because at the beginning, Phil and I had a small office that every time it would rain, and luckily it doesn't rain too much in LA, the water would drip through the ceiling. We had to kind of set up buckets around. So imagine you're trying to interview these like amazing men and women from these other great firms. You're like, no, don't worry. I promise you we can pay you, even though we can't afford to fix the leak in our ceiling, right? So it's like, it's how do you attract the talent and convince them, to stay with you? And then the second thing is just, weathering the down times, right? Because with any small business, you're going up and you're going down. And when you go down, how can you weather that time without letting people go, without taking on the wrong client, without making stupid decisions, because you're gonna come back up. So a lot of it was just the mental and the emotional resiliency. I don't think I really realized that, how much. Like I think every entrepreneur should learn how to train like an NBA athlete, right? They should learn how to control their mind, because your mind can go to some dark places when it gets tough, right? Especially if you're supporting kids, and even if you're not, even if it's just yourself, it's tough. So I think it's number one is the talent, and number two, just being strong in yourself, because times get tough. It's not always good,
I think the emotional resilience is really key. I think that's something that's really important, because there is so many ups and downs and challenges, and really having that mindset to just keep going. And also, some of the harder times are the biggest learning lessons, which are some of your biggest assets.
Right. Yeah. And honestly, sometimes it's knowing when to quit. And I don't mean knowing when to shut down the company. Hopefully it doesn't come to that point, but meaning knowing when, all right, I got to stop doing this. I got to pivot and go over here. And even though I've banged my head up against the wall for a year this way, I might have to go this way. But that the emotional resilience, I had no idea about that until I really got into the trenches. And it's tough. It's worth it. It's totally worth it, but it's tough, man. It's really tough.
I totally agree. Yeah. And sometimes it's hard to, like you said, quit, but I totally get what you mean. Like to give up on a path or something that you're trying that's new, that's not working, and you've put so much into it and it's just not working, and knowing when to, cut your ties with that. And what did I learn from this, and move on and go in a different direction. Sometimes it's really hard, but if you can master that, I mean, anybody that's entrepreneurial can master that, can stick around for a while.
Right.
Awesome. Well, it's been fantastic having you on here and learning more about your story. Before I let you go, let folks know where they can learn more about you, connect with you online, or learn more about what you guys are doing at Battery.
Yeah. So you can just go to our site, batteryagency.com. You can find me on LinkedIn, Anson Sowby. I really, really love LinkedIn, and I'm pretty active over there. But yeah, you can see all of our latest work on our website.
Great. Fantastic. Thanks so much for coming on the show. Welcome to the Monster Chats community. If you're listening to the podcast, please subscribe, share with your friends, and we're listening for your feedback. The show is all about you.
Thank you for tuning in for another episode of Monster Chats, presented by Monster VoIP, where we share the tools, methods, and best practices that business leaders use to build new connections, strengthen relationships, and impact sales in organizations of all shapes and sizes. If you have any questions from today's show and want to reach us directly, please text your question to 424-378-6966.